elections, those by-elections actually that were conducted yesterday in various counties, various constituencies and various wards. Joining me in studio is Javas Bigambo, who is a governance expert. Thank you very much for joining us here on News Desk.
Thank you.
Now, these by-elections were considered as a test for the 2022 general election. Do you think we met the threshold of free and fair as a country?
Well, beyond being a test or a litmus test for the 2022 general election, it is a test on our democracy and for the strength of our democracy. About the test of a free and fair and verifiable election, it left so much to be desired. Of course, the whole world and the whole country witnessed the extent of political violence that was self-evident and meted out against various people at various polling stations, whether it was in Kabuchai or Matungu. And it demonstrated that the intensity of this political and electoral violence is what is actually stopping Kenya from attaining the height or the zenith of political pluralism as is anticipated in a multi-party democracy. We saw the extent to which politicians had themselves involved in violence. We saw the extent to which goons were mobilized to met out violence on various opponents. We saw the extent to which security forces took part in abetting violence or even not ensuring that there is proper security at polling stations. So to that extent, and also seeing the extent in which there were cases of allegations of marked ballot papers, filled out forms, etc., all these demonstrate that, one, the elections, yes, were conducted, but were not truly fair, were not satisfactory, did not actually meet the test of fairness and the legibility that is expected of a democratic country such as ours. Looking at the extent to which elections in this country, some have been annulled because of lack of fairness, lack of transparency, etc. When you look at, for example, the case of Raila Odinga versus Uhuru Kenyatta and the IEBC 2013, the determination of the court, and all these issues demonstrate that we are still, as a nation, stuck in the long night of captive violence, lack of fairness, worries, and anxieties in matters of elections. And these, with case in point in Matungu, the case in point in Kabuchai, and looking back, the case in point in the past by-elections that were conducted in the coastal region. Also, when you look at the extent of violence in London Ward, it tells you that the stakes were high in these by-elections. And this actually gives a clearer picture that 2022, the stakes may even be higher. And unless we start looking keenly at the manner in which we are going to work around various frameworks of the elections, the governance frameworks and policy, the manner in which IEBC conducts, safeguards electoral processes, then there is so much to worry about the 2022 general election.
And I like that you say there's so much to worry about the 2022 general election. I mean, if you look at what we saw yesterday, an IEBC official being slapped, being recorded, and it being, all over the social media. Most Kenyans are asking, if this is the case right now, these are supposed to be our leaders, what happens to us?
It was really uncouth and uncalled for to have former Cabinet Secretary Echesa slap an IEBC official while conducting or carrying out his duties. And it also shows the extent to which elections can be interfered with by various interested parties. Mm-hmm. Now, it has not been clear whether Echesa was a chief agent of the candidate for his party. And even if he was, there is no justifiable cause as to why Echesa could have engaged in such malpractice at the polling station. The other thing is that when you look at, for instance, the manner in which the senator for Kakamega also and affairs around him were handled, claims of coming to a polling station with money, and some of individuals associated with him being kicked out, etc. One wonders, why is it that you would walk to a polling station with a colossal amount of money, approximated at 2 million shillings or even more? What was the purpose? What was the intent? When you look at Kabuchai's situation and members of parliament carrying in their vehicles crude weapons, and that's why they have been charged contrary to section 308, subsection 1 of the Penal Code. It tells you that we lack clear-minded leadership in this country. If at all elected leaders are themselves at the forefront of occasioning electoral violence, then what kind of example are they setting to the people? On the part of IEBC, yes, it is on record that IEBC needs to be properly reformed. If at all we have to go to 2022 general elections with a body that can prepare that election properly. Right now, we do not even have that body with filled-up commissioners as anticipated in its act. The other thing, for instance, as IEBC always conducts civic education, I opine that it would now be instrumental and important to have even IEBC trained security officers on how to engage and handle various alleged malpractices of an electoral nature at a polling station or within the electioneering period. Because we saw uniformed policemen, we saw policemen in plain cloth engaged or watching, standing a watch as various acts of violence were committed. We need to see that police officers or security agents get to be trained in the manner of handling election violences at polling stations, how to handle various individuals that are perpetrators, how to handle leaders who are coming in with a possible intent, whether to cause mayhem, to incite, etc. So here, the preparedness for elections in 2022 calls upon the vigilance and actioning on the part of citizens, on the part of IEBC, on the part of the leaders of this country. It is even very unnerving that we haven't heard the leaders of this country condemning the extent of violence and electoral malpractices that were witnessed in all these by-election centers.
So this is basically a reflection of 2022, what will happen in 2022? Do you think so?
It demonstrates that so far, years and decades into multipartyism in Kenya, and even with Constitution of Kenya 2010 in place, and even with new election laws, we haven't come to a point where we have got high regard for the law or high regard for the process of conducting elections. Okay. We have got no high regard for institutions and officials that conduct elections. So it is a culture problem. It is a problem to do with people appreciating the place of institutions, the place of policies, the place of legislation, and even individual character and conduct to ensure that free and fair elections is not just a question of it being prescribed in legislation, but also the manner in which people respect and appreciate provisions of those legislations by having a culture that is civilized, a culture that is or demonstrates humanness, and that an election should not be a question of do or die.
Okay, let's now look at the results, and we'll start with the Western region. Of course, we saw Matungu ANC took the win. In Kabuchai, Ford Kenya took the win. Do you think this is the right step towards this elusive Luhya unity?
I wouldn't look at it through the lenses of it being a closer step to achieving the elusive Luhya unity. But I would say that, one, it bolstered the confidence of ANC in being the party that intends to comb the entire region for purposes of having a higher bargaining power on the table towards forging various coalitions towards 2022 general election. It also gave a great confidence for Ford Kenya, which has been having so much of internal strife, and further, the manner in which other parties invaded what is perceived as the bedrock of the Ford Kenya politics. And so it was a great situation of confidence boosting for Ford Kenya in Kabuchai and for ANC in Matungu. And also, it demonstrates that when political parties get to select individuals who have got the qualities that can be easily marketable to the electorate, then the struggle may not be as bad as it is in situations where individuals are selected by parties who are far removed from the synchronization that individuals and their issues or challenges on the ground have for purposes of marketing and being voted for.
All right, let's head to Nakuru. We saw UDA and Jubilee split the wins, with UDA taking London Ward and also Jubilee taking Hell's Gate Ward. Now, this is where the chaos also was. Like, we saw tear gases the canisters being lobbed on the leaders, and this by-election was considered a high stake by most analysts. Do you think this is a win of some sort for UDA?
Well, I think with the benefit of an objective eye, I wouldn't say that it was really a high stake. It was just a by-election that was intended to have each party of the warring parties, Jubilee and UDA, poking fingers in each other's eye.
Then why all the chaos?
Well, basically, I think UDA was committed to prove a point to the mother party, of which it is a coalition partner, Jubilee, that even if it breaks off, it can make its own political baby steps. But also, while to the extent that it demonstrates the extent of political maturity, pluralism, and multipartism that is entertained, that Jubilee did not make sure, for instance, that UDA does not even field a candidate, even though they are of the same political faction, I think it was indicative of a few things. One, that the Jubilee party strife is something that can now not be healed or cured. Secondly, the manner in which Jubilee poured its resources in that ward demonstrated too that it was a ward of great interest for its win. This, of course, also indicates that UDA is very keen to mobilize itself and go possibly into the 2022 general election, not affiliated or working with the bigger partner, Jubilee. And so, while it can be seen as a win for William Ruto, one wonders, for instance, that is it a question of looking at this by-election in London Ward as a jostling, a fight, a duel between Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy, William Ruto? Not quite. But I would say that it has demonstrated that UDA is now keen to go for the jugular of its coalition master, Jubilee. And moving forward, we are likely to see even more wrangling within that greater party that Jubilee is with its younger brother, UDA.
All right, thank you very much, Javas Bigambo. A bittersweet, moment for most of those parties. And of course, we're living in interesting but scary times as Kenyans. Javas Bigambo, their governance expert, just analyzing those by-elections that occurred yesterday. Now to Kisumu, where 2 people have been shot dead by a suspected thug at Kisumu bus stop early today. The suspect